Hi and welcome to the first of our Thursday night question and answer sessions. As you can tell, this isn't being recorded live on Thursday night. We're in my back garden at home in Amesdale, and we're going to try and answer the questions that you guys have sent to me over the last couple of weeks, and hopefully get some good answers for you. I'm being ably assisted by my two children, Matthew and Alex, and Louise that I work with, and they might be coming in and out of shots at various times, so we'll give them a round of applause later. Before we start answering the questions, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. I've been working as a gardener for the last 17 years, and in that time I've worked for two different charities doing gardening but also horticultural therapy with people with dementia, special educational needs, mental health problems, and also run my own reasonably successful gardening business in the last 4 years. So I'm going to look at each question that you've asked over the last 2 weeks, try and give you some answers, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks. Right, question 1 from Megan in Dublin. Somehow we've managed to get a lawn full of snowdrops. I decided to leave them when I cut the grass at the weekend as they were nice, but once the fires have died off, how would you recommend dealing with them? And then she said that the whole lawn could probably do with starting over, but it's not technically her garden as it's a rental property. So she sent us a picture. So snowdrops, or Galanthus nivalis as the Latin is called, are beautiful spring bulbs that come up and have a drooping white flower, and they are considered to be one of the nicest sort of spring bulbs. They come out really early on, and a nice sign of a spring to come. So if you do want to keep them, Megan, which I suspect you do, the best thing to do is to let the flowers fade and then allow the foliage, the leaves, to brown off completely, and then mow over the area like you would with the grass normally. They will come back next year as strongly if you leave them like that, and probably as spread out. If you don't want to keep them, and it would possibly be a shame if you did want to get rid of them, but if you do want to get rid of them, you could just start mowing over as soon as the flowers have gone over, and then next year, as soon as they come up, just start to mow them off, and eventually they will die off, but it will take some time. So I hope that answers that part of the question. You then asked about the rest of the lawn, and what would be a really good way to start is to get a springtime rake like this one, so with the long sort of thin bits of wire, and just rake the grass over with that, and lots of moss and thatch will come out with that. Clear that off, and then you could put a little bit of topsoil and grass seed down on the lawn, and that should hopefully sort the lawn out. You could returf it, but obviously there'd be a cost to that, and you'd probably have to seek permission before you did it. So hope that answers your question. Thank you very much. Question 2 is from Chris in Ainsdale. Thank you very much for your question. I've just emptied a biggish raised flower bed, and I'm looking for some shrubs at the back. I want a mixture of evergreen and deciduous. Also would like some plants towards the front to give some nice colour. So thank you very much for your question. It's great. So I'm assuming that you've completely cleared the flower bed, in which case you've removed all of the weeds and it's ready to plant. So it's a really good idea to put down some organic matter, something like manure or garden compost, onto the top of the soil, and you can either dig that in or just leave it to sit on the top as a mulch. The wind's a bit strong today, but it's okay, we're going to soldier on. Or you could use some pelleted chicken manure, which would act as a fertiliser. But really, when you're starting, if you can start off with some organic matter into the soil, that really will help all of the plants in the longer term, because you want to plant it and leave it relatively forever. So in terms of the shrubs at the back, I think I've spoken to you before and you've mentioned about wanting to plant some bamboo, so we'll deal with that first because I know that's something you like. There's a really lovely bamboo called a black stem bamboo. I'm going to put a list of all of the names of the plants onto Facebook for you, so don't worry about jotting down the names, they'll have the proper names on there. But that can potentially go up to about 5 metres in height, so that is quite a sizable chunky bamboo. There are others available that will grow slightly smaller, but all of them are relatively quite tall in reality. So if you are going to plant one, just be aware of how big they'll get, and also that they do spread generally. So you can plant them into a container in the ground and that will help restrict them, or you could put a square of flagstones around them and that will just stop the roots from spreading out too much, but just to be aware of how big they can get. So in terms of the other plants at the back for the shrubs, there's a lovely Mahonia called Soft Caress, and that it doesn't have the spiky leaves that an ordinary Mahonia has, and that would look very nice, get lovely yellow flowers off that. Then there's Cotinus, which is smoke bush, and that has some lovely purpley foliage and has sort of misty like flowers on it, which are lovely. There's Photinia, the red robin, which is always really nice, adds a really good backdrop for other plants. Let me see, I wrote some others down. Phormiums are lovely, which are the New Zealand flaxes. They add some dramatic sort of sculptural elements to a garden. Again, it depends kind of what theme you're going for, but that could work very well with the bamboo. The black elder is also lovely with the cotinus, and again that has lovely sort of purpley dark leaves and pinky white flowers. That's lovely. Buddleias get a lot of bad press, but I quite like them personally. They would do well. Again, they attract butterflies in a really nice way. It really depends on what you like, whether you like those or not. Lilacs can be lovely, as can Philadelphus. Again, I will give you a list of all of these. And the other one is dogwoods, Cornus alba, and they get really dramatic red stems over the winter, and you're growing those for the red stems. So good to think about the garden in winter, that you don't just want it to be nice in summer. Okay, and then in terms of the front, the wild geraniums are always good value. They spread really nicely without kind of taking over completely, and are always really good flowering, and they do grow really well round here. Hellebores are also lovely. I'm just going to adjust my cheat sheet here. Sedums grow really well around here as well, and again they would fit in with the overall theme of some of the other ones that we've suggested. Dicentra, or bleeding hearts, are really beautiful, and again add some dramatic colour, and they would die off over the winter, so you need to be thinking about things that give you succession of flowering. Hebes are always lovely, irises, periwinkle, begonias, and then in terms of height of summer, Crocosmia. Again, that has a bit of a bad press because of the orange variety, which spreads itself merrily. But if you grow the Lucifer variety, that doesn't spread as well, and you get tall, beautiful red flowers on that, which are gorgeous. That's one to hunt out as a corm, and they can be incredibly good value when they're like that. And then Echinacea and Rudbeckia, really lovely kind of prairie-style plants that look beautiful over the summer. So I hope that's some ideas. As I said, I'm going to give you a full list of some other ideas, but it's just a good starting point. I hope that helps. All right, thank you. Question 3 is from Karina. She's not said where she lives, but I think it might be in Ainsdale, certainly in the local area. So she's asked, how can I get rid of invasive ground elder without killing the other plants growing in the same area? So for those of you that don't know, although I suspect most of you will have come across it, this is ground elder. So it has not unattractive flowers, and the leaves are actually almost like a herb. You can use them in cooking, but it's a very pungent sort of dish, so probably best to just actually get rid of it. And it has lots of foliage, and then underground has lots of long roots that spread really rapidly, and they are a pain to get rid of. And also, you can see from here, I've just pulled this up from my own garden, the roots break off very, very easily. So it's how to get rid of it without damaging the other plants, because it tends to sort of grow in and amongst other things. The best way, unfortunately, is to get on your hands and knees with a hand fork and gently work along all the roots and pull it out. Spraying it in and amongst other plants is really just, you're not going to succeed very well, I'm afraid. So it's a case of just getting in and weeding it out. The key is to not break the roots up into lots of little pieces. So if you were to use a hoe to weed it out, you're just going to end up snapping up all the roots into lots of tiny little pieces, and those pieces will then grow into new plants, so you're actually making the problem worse. You could try just taking the leaves off it, just pulling the leaves off, and eventually you would succeed if you pull off every single leaf all of the time. But again, that's a bit of a labour of love. We've had some success just weeding it out carefully with a hand fork, and it does work over time. So, but it is a pain. And that same rule applies for things like bindweed, couch grass or couch grass, mare's tail, those kind of invasive weeds like that have long roots. Just be careful to not break up the root when you weed it out. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry it can't be more of a miracle cure, but that's about the best way. Alright, thank you. Okay, so question 4 is from Alison in Ainsdale. Thank you very much for your question. So she's asking when she can get back into a nursery, because obviously a lot of things are disruptive with the lockdown. She's asking for a recommendation for a tallish, slender plant, preferably with scented flowers that will attract insects. And it's a great question, and I think there's probably not that many plants that fit the bill for all of those things at once. I think the only one that really does is probably a lilac, which can be pruned so they stay almost like a standard rose shape, like a lollipop shape, or you can allow them to go into much more of a bush. So you could sort of prune it carefully so it stays quite slender, and again that would give you lovely scented flowers that would attract insects. Other than that, the other things are generally going to be one thing or the other. They're not going to give you the nice scent and also be tall and slender and attract insects, so it's a middle ground. So in terms of sort of shrubby plants, like I said, there's lilac or buddleia, again would be lovely. And if you like buddleia, they have a bit of a bad press, but I think they're quite nice personally, and they really are the insects just flock to them when they're in flower. And there's something called sweet box, Sarcocoa humilis, which has lovely scented flowers that smell really sweet, like honey sweet, really early on in the year, sort of really early spring, if not winter. And those really do attract the insects at that time of year and give you lovely scent, but they kind of grow into more like a bush. So again, you could prune them, but it just depends, just give you a bit more flower time over the year. And then for annual plants, or plants that are going to sort of die off over winter, salvias and veronicas, verbenas and Ami major, are all lovely plants that again really would attract insects and give you lovely flower colour, maybe not scent, but nice flower colour. And again, a little bit of pruning, you can make them into a bit more of a sort of tall shape. But again, they probably are sort of the salvias and things like that are going to be a bit more shrubby, but the verbenas are going to grow up more upright. So I hope that helps. As I said, I think lilac is probably your best answer, but you could always do a little clump of a few of those things together and you're going to get a load of insects being happy all year round. So thanks for the question. Question 5 from Lisa in Ainsdale. Thank you very much for your question. This question is divided up into 3, so I'm going to do each one at a time. So first of all, she asked, I ordered a large volume of plug bedding plants, and she said 540 of them, so I think she's got enough for everybody. But she did that on a bundle deal, which is really good at this time of year anyway, but it's really good at the moment with everybody on lockdown supporting local businesses, so excellent. So she's asking, the query is about growing on. I've used all my small pots and medium pots getting them potted on. However, due to lack of space, had to plant 2 or 3 plants in the same pot. So when I come to plant out the pots, may I split them or will it damage the roots? So that's a great question, and it's a really good way of using up the space and compost efficiently, to stick 3 or even 4 plugs within the one pot. So a plug is like a rooted plant. Normally the roots are into a little plug like that sort of size, about an inch, 3 to 4 centimetres, and then you can just stick that in the soil and then those roots are merrily able to grow out. So it's a really good idea to do that anyway. Sticking one to a pot can feel a little bit wasteful anyway, and when you do come to bed them out, put them out into the garden, it'd be really easy just to split them up just with your thumb probably, and just divide them into 3 or 4. Some of the roots will be damaged, but it'll be okay. The plants will happily survive that. Obviously, tread fairly carefully, try and pull them apart rather than splitting them, but they should be fine. They won't do them any damage at all. And you can grow them on like that, and you could even then keep some back into the pots and give them to friends or relatives as they need them. So, but no, that should be fine. You won't do them any damage. So the next part of the question is, any innovative ideas for planting veg? My 2 raised beds and bags are going to be very full. So everybody at the moment is trying to do their bit to grow their own, as the shops are emptying out of fresh fruit and vegetables. It's really good to have your own supply at home if you can. Every little helps and all that. So definitely grow as much as you can in the ground. It's the best place for most of it. If you can get it into the ground, that's best. After that, you can use any kind of container really. Buckets. You could use bags. So you can get particular grow bags for potatoes. But somebody suggested using old pet food bags and sticking a couple of holes in the bottom of those because they're nice and thick and sturdy. Fill them up with some soil and compost, and then you can grow pretty well anything in that really because they're of the size, so definitely potatoes though. As I said, you could grow strawberries in buckets and hang them up, and then that stops quite so many kind of animals and birds getting to them. They tend to not like to sort of sit on it as much. And then you can also grow sort of smaller plants like lettuce and things like that in a drain pipe in a gutter, and then you can effectively just leave it in there. Obviously fill it up with compost. It's nice and easy for watering as long as the water has some way of going at the end. You can water it, it keeps the water in there, and if you want to plant those then out into the garden, you can just make a nice gutter sized and shaped mark in the ground and just literally slide them out into that. But really, as long as you fill it up fairly full, you can just leave the lettuce to grow in there, and that should be absolutely fine. So the other thing would be to think about using your walls. So you can get relatively cheaply online. You can get green wall materials, so they're either pots or fabric, and you can just simply nail those almost to the wall. And again, they just have an area to plant into. You're probably obviously not going to get away with growing things like potatoes in those, but lots of your cut and come again salads, your outdoor tomatoes, even things like cucumbers and things like that you might get away with in those. You have to keep them watered and fed, but that's not too bad. We do have a bit of more time at the moment, so you might be able to get away with keeping those happy. And lots of those would be really good for herbs as well, particularly if you put them up onto a sunny wall. So I think that's about it really. But again, any container, you wash out your tins of tomatoes and plant them up with plants. That should be they should be fine. Obviously, anything that really needs a good depth of soil, so things like carrots and potatoes, parsnips, anything like that, it's really good to get them in the ground or in a very deep bag or bucket, and then keep the smaller pots for things that don't need as much space, like your lettuce and cut and come again, things like that. So I hope that answers your question. The third part of your question, which is a really good idea, she's asked any thoughts on a Dig for Ainsdale type initiative where we can safely share cuttings, seeds, surplus stock whilst the garden centres are closed, and involve some of the local horticultural groups. And I think that is an absolutely fantastic idea. I think obviously would have to be tailored around the restrictions due to lockdown, but I think people are using sites like Gumtree and eBay and Facebook Marketplace to distribute their surplus stock. So I mean, that's a good place to start if you just want to do your own. And I think after that, I think it's a case of finding people that know that there's other people that need stuff. So I think it's a fantastic idea, and I will do some research into that and get back to you about that one. But a great idea, and as I said, maybe you could, if you do personally want to just use some up, you could just check on your sort of friends and neighbours first of all. I'm sure you've done that anyway, but it's always a good place to start. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much. Question 6 comes from Sarah in Birkdale, and she's asked me to do a little bit about lawn care, general lawn care, and she's also asked about pelleted chicken fertiliser or chicken manure. So I'm going to deal with the chicken manure first, and it is simply chicken poo sort of squished down into little pellets, and it works really well as an organic fertiliser for your entire garden. Almost all plants really respond really well to it. You can use it quite regularly. It's not going to harm the plants. Ironically, apart from your lawn, it's not one to be used on the lawn. So don't be tempted to spread it out on your lawn. Just put it onto bare soil, and I think you put it out at a rate of roughly about a handful for every square metre of bare soil. And you can be fairly liberal with that, spread it out, and then just use a rake or a hoe to just work it into the soil. Something some people have reported is that it's quite attractive to dogs to eat. So if you have a pet dog, or maybe I suppose possibly a pet cat, they might be tempted to eat it. I would suspect it probably won't do them much good really if they eat it, particularly if they eat quite a lot of it. So if you've got a pet or something like that, and if you want to just reduce the smell, definitely just take a hoe and just work it into the soil, and once it's had a water or it's been rained on, the smell really does very quickly dissipate and go away anyway. So I suspect, maybe if you're a little bit concerned about it, you can always just give it a bit of a water with a hose pipe. So in terms of lawn care, we've found that the most important thing really is to be mowing quite regularly. So, once a fortnight, once every 3 weeks when the grass is growing. Keeping it at a nice length almost all of the time does really help the lawn to sort of grow quite well. And if you can get hold of a mower that has a roller on the back of it, that also does help with the lawn. It helps squash the upright parts of the grass plant downwards, and it helps root and give you a nice kind of thick, lush lawn. So, but obviously if you've only got an electric mower, that's fine, keep using that. Cut it fairly regularly but quite high, so possibly even on your highest setting of the mower if it's got an adjustable setting on it, and then but mow it quite regularly. And then scarification is the next thing that we find works really well. So you can do that with your springtime rake. So a rake like this one with the long slender bits at the end, the wire, and just quite aggressively rake into your lawn with your springtime rake, and lots of moss and thatch will come up there, which really is not doing the lawn any good. It's just sitting on top of the soil and just not really helping the lawn. So by getting that out, it gets more oxygen and carbon dioxide down into the plant. It also just makes the lawn look nicer and stops as much moss build up. So that really helps. So you can do it with a rake, or you can buy a scarifier, which is just looks very much like a lawn mower, and that just has lots of sort of thin bits of metal like this that rake out the moss and thatch. And you can do that fairly often, twice a year definitely, sort of early on in the spring and then later on into autumn. If you do that regularly over each year, along with your regular grass cutting, that really will often help a lawn look really a lot better without having to put any chemicals or anything like that onto it. If your lawn is still struggling, you can aerate it. So you can take a fork, like a garden fork, not an eating fork, and press that into the soil, give it a little waggle, and that will allow just a little bit more air to get down into the roots of the plant. You do that all over the bits that look the most compacted, but you can do it over the whole lawn. It's quite a tiring exercise. Again, you can get a machine that can do it, you can hire one of those, but really a garden fork over the worst bits will often do good. And then you could brush some horticultural sand into that, but often just leaving it open is okay. You allow just a bit of air to get down into it. If you then do want to feed it, a general purpose lawn food, you can buy again spring and autumn and summer ones. That will help it. Feed it possibly a little bit less than they suggest. Carry on with your mowing and scarifying as the instructions give you. And as I said, just feed a little bit less than it suggests. Never overfeed a lawn. It ends up scorching the grass. And even if you do overfeed it and the grass grows, it grows very lush, puts out lots of top growth, lots of leaves. You end up just having to mow it more often. And although it might look lush and green for a short period, in the longer term it's not actually very good for the lawn, for the plants in the lawn. So you're best to just, as I said, light feeding, keep on with the mowing and scarification, and that will often sort it out. If it is mostly moss, you can often just be better to just start afresh, take it up and put some fresh turf down, and often you try and resurrect a lawn, and really you might be better to just start again fresh. So I hope that answers your question. Also, make sure you edge it as well, because it makes it look really nice. It's a very simple thing to do to a lawn, is just to put a nice edge on it with a pair of edging shears, and it is amazing how much better the lawn will look after you've done that. It looks much more loved, obviously once you've mowed it. So I hope that answers your question. Alright, thanks.